The forest was alive with whispers. The dense canopy above filtered the sunlight into shards of gold, casting an eerie glow over the undergrowth. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the occasional rustle of unseen creatures sent ripples of unease through the stillness. Somewhere in the distance, a bird let out a sharp, piercing cry, but it was quickly swallowed by the oppressive silence that followed. Deep within this remote wildlife sanctuary, a lone figure moved cautiously through the underbrush. Dr. Elena Marquez, a wildlife biologist, had been tracking a rare species of scorpion for weeks. Her boots crunched softly against the forest floor, each step deliberate, each breath measured. She carried a small backpack with her equipment, a notebook, a camera, and a glass jar for specimens. Her dark hair was tied back, and her olive-green field jacket blended seamlessly with the foliage around her. But despite her preparedness, the forest felt different today. It was as if the trees were watching her, their gnarled branches twisting like skeletal fingers. Elena paused, her eyes scanning the ground. She had been following faint tracks, tiny imprints in the soft soil that hinted at the scorpion's presence. The species she sought, Androctonus sylvestris, was elusive and highly venomous. Its sting could paralyze a grown man within minutes. But it wasn't the scorpion's venom that fascinated her. It was its behavior. Unlike other scorpions, this one was rumored to exhibit a peculiar form of intelligence, almost as if it could anticipate its prey's movements. The forest seemed to close in around her as she ventured deeper. The sunlight grew dimmer and the shadows lengthened. She could hear the faint rustling of leaves, the occasional snap of a twig, but there was no sign of the scorpion. Her heart began to race, though she tried to steady it. She had been in dangerous situations before, encounters with venomous snakes, territorial predators, even a close call with a jaguar, but this felt different. This felt personal, as if the forest itself was testing her. Then she saw it. A flicker of movement near the base of a fallen tree. Elena froze, her breath catching in her throat. She crouched slowly, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the spot. There, partially hidden beneath a layer of moss and leaves, was the scorpion. Its exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian, and its tail curled menacingly above its body. The creature was larger than she had expected, its pincers sharp and formidable. But what struck her most was its stillness. It wasn't fleeing or preparing to strike. It was waiting. Elena's hand trembled as she reached for her camera. She had to document this moment, this rare encounter. But as she adjusted the lens, a sudden noise shattered the silence, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Her head snapped up, her eyes darting through the trees. The scorpion, too, seemed to react, its tail twitching as if sensing a greater threat. The growl came again, closer this time. Elena's pulse quickened, her instincts screaming at her to run, but she couldn't. Not yet. She had come too far to abandon her research. She forced herself to focus, to steady her breathing. The scorpion was still there, its pincers now raised in a defensive posture. It was as if the creature knew something she didn't. Then she saw it. Emerging from the shadows was a massive jaguar, its golden eyes fixed on her with predatory intensity. Its muscles rippled beneath its spotted coat, and its claws dug into the soft earth as it advanced. Elena's mind raced. She had no weapons, no way to defend herself. She could try to climb a tree, but the jaguar was faster, stronger. She was trapped. But the jaguar wasn't looking at her. Its gaze was locked on the scorpion. Elena's confusion gave way to a dawning realization. The scorpion wasn't just a predator, it was prey, and the jaguar, a creature she had always admired for its power and grace, was now her unlikely ally. She watched in stunned silence as the two predators faced off, the tension between them palpable. The scorpion's tail lashed out, its stinger glinting in the dim light, But the jaguar was quicker. With a swift, calculated movement, it swiped at the scorpion with its massive paw, sending the creature flying into the underbrush. For a moment, there was silence. Then the jaguar turned its gaze back to Elena. She held her breath, her body rigid with fear. But the jaguar didn't attack. It simply stared at her, its eyes unreadable, before turning and disappearing into the forest. Elena remained frozen for what felt like an eternity, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. The scorpion was gone, the jaguar was gone, and she was alone once more. But the forest no longer felt oppressive. It felt alive, vibrant, as if it had revealed a secret only she could understand. As she made her way back to camp, her thoughts were a whirlwind of emotions: relief, awe, and a newfound respect for the delicate balance of nature. She had come to study the scorpion, but she had left with something far greater, a glimpse into the intricate web of life, where even the smallest creatures played a vital role. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest into twilight, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she had been part of something extraordinary. The scorpion in the claw, predator and prey, had shown her that in the wild, nothing was as it seemed, and sometimes the greatest danger was also the greatest teacher. Elena's camp was a small clearing nestled at the edge of the forest, where the trees thinned and the underbrush gave way to a rocky outcrop. A single tent stood in the center, its fabric fluttering faintly in the evening breeze. A fire pit, long cold, sat nearby, surrounded by scattered equipment and supplies. She dropped her backpack by the tent and sank onto a log, her legs trembling beneath her. The adrenaline that had carried her through the encounter was fading, leaving her drained and shaken. She stared into the darkening forest, her mind replaying the events. The scorpion's stillness, the jaguar's calculated strike, the way the two predators had seemed to acknowledge each other, and her, in that fleeting moment. It was as if the forest had orchestrated the encounter, a reminder that she was merely a visitor in its domain. She had spent years studying animals, but tonight she felt as though she had been the one under observation. The night deepened, and the forest came alive with new sounds. Crickets chirped in rhythmic unison, and the occasional hoot of an owl echoed through the trees. But Elena's senses remained on high alert. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, made her heart skip a beat. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She lit a small lantern and set it on the ground, its warm glow pushing back the shadows just enough to make her feel safer. She opened her notebook and began to jot down her observations, her handwriting shaky but determined. She described the scorpion's appearance, its behavior, the way it had seemed to anticipate the jaguar's presence. She noted the jaguar's unexpected intervention, its almost deliberate choice to spare her. The words flowed onto the page, a desperate attempt to make sense of what she had witnessed. But as she wrote, a new sound reached her ears, a faint, rhythmic clicking, like the tapping of claws against stone. She froze, her pen hovering above the paper. The sound was coming from the edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of the lantern's light. Her breath caught in her throat as she slowly turned her head, her eyes straining to pierce the darkness. At first she saw nothing. Then, as her vision adjusted, she noticed a pair of glowing eyes reflecting the lantern's light. They were low to the ground, unblinking, and they seemed to be moving closer. The clicking grew louder, more deliberate, and Elena's mind raced. Was it the jaguar, returning to finish what it had started, or something else entirely? She set her notebook aside and reached for the only weapon she had, a small folding knife she kept in her pocket. It was a pitiful defense against a predator, but it was all she had. She gripped it tightly, her knuckles white, and rose to her feet. The eyes stopped moving, but the clicking continued. a steady, unnerving rhythm that seemed to echo in her chest. Then, slowly, the creature stepped into the light. It wasn't the jaguar. It wasn't even a mammal. The creature that emerged from the shadows was a massive, armored arthropod, a giant centipede, its segmented body glistening like polished bronze in the lantern's glow. Its countless legs moved in perfect unison, each step producing that same eerie clicking sound. Its antennae twitched as it surveyed the clearing, and its mandibles, sharp and serrated, opened and closed with a menacing precision. Elena's stomach churned. She had encountered centipedes before, but nothing like this. This creature was easily 2 feet long, its size and appearance defying logic. It moved with a predatory grace, its body coiling and uncoiling as it advanced toward her. She took a step back, her mind racing. Centipedes were venomous, their bites capable of causing excruciating pain and even paralysis. But this one was something else entirely. The centipede paused, its antennae flicking in her direction. For a moment, it seemed to consider her, its movements deliberate and calculating. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, it lunged. Elena stumbled backward, her knife slashing wildly through the air. The blade connected with the centipede's exoskeleton, but it barely left a scratch. The creature recoiled, its mandibles snapping inches from her leg before retreating slightly. It circled her, its movements fluid and unnervedly intelligent, as if it were testing her defenses. Her heart pounded in her chest as she realized the truth. This wasn't just an animal. It was a predator, and she was its prey. The forest had thrown another challenge at her, another reminder of its unforgiving nature. She tightened her grip on the knife, her mind racing for a plan. She couldn't outrun it, and she couldn't fight it. Not with a blade meant for cutting rope and opening cans. Then, as if in answer to her silent plea, a familiar growl rumbled through the clearing. The jaguar emerged from the shadows, its golden eyes fixed on the centipede. The creature hissed, its body coiling defensively, but the jaguar didn't hesitate. With a powerful swipe of its paw, it sent the centipede sprawling. The arthropod writhed on the ground, its legs flailing, but the jaguar was relentless. It pounced, its jaws closing around the centipede's midsection with a sickening crunch. Elena watched in stunned silence as the jaguar made quick work of the creature, its movements efficient and brutal. When it was done, it turned to her, its eyes meeting hers once more. There was no malice in its gaze, no hunger, only a quiet understanding. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the jaguar vanished into the forest, leaving Elena alone with the remains of the centipede. She sank to her knees, her body trembling with a mixture of relief and disbelief. The forest had tested her, pushed her to her limits, and yet it had also protected her. She didn't know why the jaguar had intervened or why the centipede had come for her, but she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer just an observer. She was part of the forest's story, a thread woven into its intricate tapestry. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, Elena packed up her camp and began the long trek back to civilization. Her notebook was filled with observations, but her mind was filled with questions that would haunt her for years to come. The scorpion, the jaguar, the centipede, they were more than just animals. They were symbols of the forest's mystery, its beauty, and its danger. And as she left the sanctuary behind, she couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching her still, its secrets waiting to be uncovered by the next brave soul who dared to venture into its depths. Elena's journey out of the forest was a blur. Her legs moved mechanically, her mind still reeling from the night's events. The dense canopy above filtered the early morning light into a mosaic of greens and golds, but the beauty of the forest felt distant, almost alien. Her thoughts were consumed by the jaguar, the centipede, and the scorpion, 3 predators each playing a role in a story she still didn't fully understand. By midday, she reached the edge of the sanctuary, where the trees gave way to a dirt road leading to the nearest village. Her truck was parked where she had left it, its dusty exterior a stark contrast to the vibrant life of the forest. She tossed her backpack into the passenger seat and climbed in, her body heavy with exhaustion. As the engine roared to life, she glanced back at the forest one last time. It stood silent and impenetrable, its secrets still hidden within its depths. The drive to the village was uneventful, the monotony of the road giving her mind time to wander. She replayed the encounter with the centipede over and over, each time questioning what she had seen. Giant centipedes were not unheard of, but one of that size, and with such deliberate, almost intelligent behavior, was beyond anything she had ever encountered. And the jaguar, why had it intervened? Was it merely protecting its territory, or had it sensed something more? The village was small, a cluster of weathered buildings surrounded by fields of crops and grazing livestock. Elena parked her truck outside the only inn and stepped inside, the cool, dim interior a welcome relief from the heat. The innkeeper, an elderly woman with kind eyes and a weathered face, greeted her with a nod. "You look like you've seen a ghost," the woman said, her voice tinged with concern. Elena managed a weak smile. "Something like that." She paid for a room and dragged herself upstairs, her body aching with every step. The room was sparse but clean, with a narrow bed and a single window overlooking the village square. She dropped her backpack on the floor and collapsed onto the bed, her eyes closing almost immediately. Sleep came quickly, but it was far from restful. Her dreams were filled with images of the forest, the scorpion's gleaming exoskeleton, the jaguar's golden eyes, the centipede's countless legs clicking against the ground. She woke several times throughout the night, her heart racing, only to fall back into the same restless dreams. When morning came, she felt no more rested than she had the night before. She dressed quickly and headed downstairs, where the innkeeper was serving breakfast to a handful of villagers. Elena took a seat at a corner table and picked at a plate of eggs and beans, her appetite non-existent. As she ate, she overheard snippets of conversation from the other tables. The villagers spoke in hushed tones, their words laced with unease. She caught phrases like, "strange sightings," and "animals acting strange," and her curiosity was piqued. She finished her meal and approached the innkeeper, who was wiping down the counter. "What are they talking about?" Elena asked, nodding toward the villagers. The innkeeper hesitated, her expression darkening. "There's been odd things happening lately, animals coming out of the forest acting aggressive. Some say it's a bad omen." Elena's pulse quickened. "What kind of animals?" The innkeeper shrugged. "All kinds. Snakes, spiders, even a jaguar or two. They say the forest is angry." Elena's mind raced. Could the strange behavior of the animals be connected to what she had experienced? She thanked the innkeeper and hurried back to her room, where she dug through her backpack for her notebook. Flipping through the pages, she found the notes she had taken on the scorpion, the jaguar, and the centipede. There had to be a connection, some thread tying it all together. She spent the rest of the day in the village, speaking to anyone who would listen. The stories were consistent. Animals were behaving erratically, venturing closer to human settlements, and displaying unusual aggression. Some villagers blamed deforestation, others spoke of curses, but no one had any real answers. By evening, Elena had made up her mind. She couldn't leave without understanding what was happening. The forest had shown her a glimpse of its secrets, and she needed to see it through. She packed her supplies and prepared to return to the sanctuary, despite the villagers' warnings. As she drove back toward the forest, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the landscape in shades of orange and purple. The road grew narrower and rougher, the trees closing in around her. When she reached the edge of the sanctuary, she parked her truck and stepped out, her senses on high alert. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual chorus of insects and birds absent. She moved cautiously, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The air was thick with tension, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. She didn't have to wait long. As she ventured deeper, she began to notice signs of disturbance. Trampled underbrush, claw marks on trees, and the occasional scuttling sound in the shadows. Then she saw it. A pair of glowing eyes, watching her. It wasn't the jaguar, it wasn't the centipede. It was something else entirely. A creature she couldn't identify, its form shifting and writhing in the darkness. Her flashlight flickered, the beam growing dim, and in that moment of uncertainty, the creature lunged. Elena stumbled backward, her heart pounding, but the attack never came. Instead, the creature stopped just short of her, its body trembling as if fighting some internal struggle. Then, with a final shuddering breath, it collapsed to the ground, its form dissolving into the earth. She stood frozen, her mind struggling to comprehend what she had just witnessed. The forest was changing, its balance disrupted by forces she couldn't yet understand, and as she turned to leave, she knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. The forest had more secrets to reveal, and she would be there to uncover them, no matter the cost.